So welcome everybody. It's not a nice topic today, it's not a nice setting today, but we're going to make something nice out of it. And based on previous experiences, I think this may be a lecture that is not so difficult for you. You don't need to make many notes, but something that you will not forget and something that will hopefully benefit you in your careers. The topic is corruption. And let me first introduce myself. My name is Wehrens. I'm a pharmacist, studied in Utrecht. And while studying, I thought, interesting study, but I don't see myself working the rest of my life in a pharmacy on the corner of the street. So luckily, I met another pharmacist who was working in Ghana in a hospital. And I thought, that's it. So I finished the studies, married the next month, and then we were off to Africa, where I worked for 7 years, first in Zambia and then in Uganda. In Zambia, I was lecturing. I was training pharmacy technicians to become pharmaceutical staff in the country, which were badly needed. In Uganda, I got into supply management. There was a big warehouse, a big storeroom, a big warehouse, where medicines were stored, which were procured internationally on a big scale, and then distributed to hospitals and to refugee camps in Uganda, in Sudan, in Rwanda, in the Congo. And that's what I really liked. So that became the rest of my career, working in supply of medicines for low and middle income countries. In 2001, we came back to Holland and I worked a couple of years for IDA Foundation, which you've probably never heard of, but it's big. IDA is based in Amsterdam, and it's a non-profit distributor of medicines for low and middle income countries. So in the Netherlands, we don't know IDA because they don't supply anything to the Netherlands, or even they don't supply anything within the European Union, but their focus is developing countries. So if you were ever to work for, let's say, the Red Cross or MSF, Médecins Sans Frontières, you probably would find you were supplied by IDA with medicines for your project. 2004, I decided to start my own consultancy. ZZP, just me, very small. And I named it FASUMA. FASUMA stands for Pharmaceutical Supply Management, because that's really the thing that I'm enjoying most of doing, how to get medicines to where they're needed and trying to do that of good quality and low cost and an efficient way. That consultancy worked well. I've been regularly consulting for, amongst others, these organizations, WHO and UN, United Nations subsidiaries, and the Global Fund. And the Global Fund is the one that I'm not sure if that has been covered already in your course so far. Can you give me a feedback whether Global Fund is something you've heard of? I see both yeses and nos. Okay. There are many organizations, aid organizations that help developing countries with health projects. The Global Fund is really by far the largest. It's like the Google of the search engines. It's like the Microsoft or Apple. And in some ways, it is also like these organizations, because 25 years ago, the Global Fund didn't exist. It was established 20 years ago. And out of nothing, it became the largest donor in developing countries. And they focus on these 3 diseases: HIV, tuberculosis, and malaria. So almost every developing country, whether they're low or medium income, they get a lot of money from Global Fund to fight these 3 diseases. Okay. Global Fund is based in Geneva. They don't have any country offices. So their approach is, okay, we have a central office in Geneva. We're going to give billions of dollars out, not millions, billions, to countries, some of them risky for corruption also and mismanagement. So how do we going to control that money is not abused? So their model is that they engage this organization PricewaterhouseCoopers, which also has an office in Rotterdam. They are accountants, and they are engaged by the Global Fund to check that they have offices in many, many countries. So they check whether the recipients of those huge fundings use that money appropriately. And this is where I come in, because PwC has been one of the organizations that hired me to do investigations in how is the money used in developing countries from the Global Fund. Are you still with me? So Global Fund, big donor, PwC checking whether that money is properly used. That's where I come in. And that's especially where I encountered a lot of cases of fraud and corruption. And many of the examples I'll share with you today are from that expertise. Okay. You see the countries that I've been working in, the ones that I've put in bold are countries I've worked really regularly, sometimes 15 or 20 times. Before we proceed, any questions? Can you hear me well? I guess so then, yeah. This whole presentation that I'm showing you is a Prezi, and this is the hyperlink. So you either copy it now or you'll get it later. I'll share it with Jan. So everything you see on the screen is yours, and you can check it whenever you feel like. Today, we're going to talk about corruption, and my aims is that you will be able to define corruption and mention some of the manifestations, the different forms of corruptions that can occur. I hope that by the end of this show, you will more easily recognize corruption. You'll be primed, you'll recognize it. With many topics, it's like that. Once you know something, you see it. Once you've learned something, you recognize it. And it's same as with corruption. Most of you look fairly young. You're at the start of your careers. I'm a bit older. I'd like to share with you some of the things I've experienced in this respect. Also, we look at some of the conditions that enable corruption to flourish. Some of the measures that can be taken to stop corruption, and we look at some of the organizations that try to fight corruption. Let's first start with a definition. If you look up corruption, you'll find pretty much a definition like this. It's the abuse of entrusted power for personal gain. Okay. Abuse of entrusted power for personal gain. So somebody entrusted you. Somebody said, we trust you to handle this money. We trust you to look after this patient. We trust you to procure these medicines for our hospital. We trust you to do that. And you abuse that trust for your personal gain. Okay, so it can take many forms. Maybe in corruption, you think about bribing. Somebody gives money to get something done, shady business. Yeah, that's one form of corruption, but there's more. So let's look at some types. First of all, we have to distinguish between, can you read that? Petty corruption. Petty means small. I'll make it a bit bigger for you. Petty is small corruption. Usually when I'm with you in the group live, I quickly ask you to raise fingers if you've ever been to developing countries. Maybe I can do it now. Who has been to developing countries? Maybe for travel or work. Okay, I see Brit and Kimia, Danielle. Okay, and then my next question is, have you ever encountered corruption there? Maybe? Tessel? Okay, let's try it. Tessel, open your mic. Tell us your example.
Well, we were driving in Mozambique and just up a hill, over a hill, and just after there were policemen, and they said we were driving too fast, so we had to pay. But yeah, we were just driving. Wasn't even hard, but yeah.
And you didn't get a receipt?
No.
Excellent example. Thank you, Tessel. That's something that you absolutely will encounter when you travel a few weeks or even a few weeks in Africa. This is very common. Police will stop you for some reason, something you haven't done, and they will make it very look as if you made a big crime and you may be arrested, and they will confiscate your car. But you know, it's lunchtime. Maybe you can help me because, you know, then we can make things a bit easier for you. Okay, so you give $10 and there you go. That was corruption, Tessel. Did you pay?
Yeah, my dad did.
Okay, I've been through that. I've done it. That's corruption from his side, from the policeman's side. And yeah, we went along with that. Okay, this is an excellent example of petty corruption. This is something very small. This has no impact on your life. It's no impact on Mozambique. It's small stuff. It happens a lot, yeah, but it's small stuff. There's something else. Grant corruption. That happens also in Mozambique, but also here in the Netherlands at a very high level. This is, you know, at national level, at corporate level. Big decisions involving huge sums of money, maybe decisions to go to war or not, weapon transactions, cartel companies forming cartels to drive prices up. That's grant corruption. The thing is that grant corruption is very difficult for you and me, for the average citizen to see, to recognize. You may know it's there, but you don't really see it. But that experience you had, Tessel, in Mozambique was very visible. You will never forget it. So if you go by that, you would say, Mozambique is corrupt and the Netherlands is not corrupt, because this will not happen to you here in the Netherlands. I guess none of you has ever been stopped by a policeman because you were having your phone on the bike or your light wasn't working, or he may have stopped you, he may have fined you, but there was never an option that you could bribe him and then he would let you go, right? So petty corruption in the Netherlands is very rare, but grant corruption happens here as well. Okay, let's look at some forms of corruption. Bribery, omkoperij in Dutch. That's the first thing that usually comes to mind, right? Some money is passed under the table to get something done which shouldn't have been done, shouldn't be allowed. But because of the money, greasing the palms and things get smoother and things get done illegally. That's corruption. Embezzlement is stealing from the office, stealing from the hospital. You've been entrusted to look after whatever by your boss, by your employer, and you decide to take some of that home or sell it on the street, or that's abuse of entrusted power. Fraud, hey, that's another level. Fraud, somebody is really falsifying documents, signatures, stamps. It's a more planned approach. Yeah? You see the difference between simply quickly giving that policeman, giving him $10, Tessel, that was bribery. Embezzlement, maybe if you take your pen from the office, which belonged to the office, okay, that's small stuff, or even big. But fraud means you're falsifying documents. Okay, so just another form of corruption. Something I have to mention here is conflict of interest. In Dutch, we call that belangenverstrengeling. So conflict of interest means that you have conflicting interests because of your different positions. You may, for example, be the one who is involved in procurement. You have to buy the new computers for the hospital. But your wife is the importer of Dell computers. And somehow you decide that the hospital needs to buy Dell computers, which you can buy from your wife. Then you have a conflict of interest, right? If your wife wasn't importing Dell computers, you probably wouldn't have stressed the need to buy Dell computers. You would have opened them up and maybe have found a better deal somewhere. So conflict of interest, I think the term is self-explanatory. Collusion, you hear that word recently a lot in especially American politics. Collusion means that parties, firms, individuals are working together behind the scenes secretly to basically to rip off the system. We'll see examples of collusions in a moment. So I leave it here for now, but just think about people doing something behind the screens. Nepotism, okay? Giving favors to family members, people of the same tribe, the same religion, the same church, whatever. Nepotism, the word is known, and I think this is a very good example of what we see nepotism happening on a big scale these days, right? Extortion and blackmail. Hey, that's another one. Now we're using threat. We're not just taking something or falsifying something. We are threatening people. If you don't do this, I know where you live. Anouk van Koppen. Hey, that is scary, right? That's scary stuff. That's dangerous stuff. That's not nice. That's, and again, another level. And also not nice is sextortion. I guess we can all imagine what happens with, for example, people in vulnerable positions, refugees fleeing their country and being abused in that way for personal gain. These are just some forms of corruption. The Corruption Perception Index, what's that? There's an organization called Transparency International, which measures corruption in every country, and every year they publish a list of countries and show how corrupt they are. How do they do that? How do you measure corruption? Well, the way they do it is they interview, they ask many people who know a country because they live there, they work there, maybe they work at the embassy or at the corporate level, journalists. And they ask them, how corrupt is that country that you know? How corrupt is Mozambique on a scale from 1 to 10? How corrupt is Germany on a scale from 1 to 10? And if you have enough people, if they have enough people to ask that question, then there's a point where they say, yes, this is a reliable outcome. So we published. So here you see their current list, and you see that Denmark comes out as cleanest. And then New Zealand and Finland and the Netherlands is on position number 8. We are clean. And of course, you're looking at the other side of the list. And yes, Somalia, South Sudan, Syria, they are the most corrupt countries on the planet. And on the map, you see these colors, these rankings expressed in a color. The more red a country is, the more corrupt it is perceived to be. Any questions or comments or any countries that you find surprising?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do they ask people in that certain country if a country is corrupt, or somewhere else around the world?
People in the country and people who really have experience with the country. For example, if you are a journalist, maybe from the BBC, but you are focused on North Korea, yeah, they would ask you, obviously. If you are a German head of Volkswagen and you do a lot of business in Brazil, they may ask you to assess Brazil. So they have both people from within the country and people from outside who really work in the country. Embassy staff, people who work at the embassy, they're not from the country, but they live in the country. They see a lot of things happening in the country, and yeah, they're also invited. So what do you think of this list? Is it helpful? Does it give a good picture?
Me?
For example, Danielle, yes?
Yeah, I don't know, actually. I think it gives kind of an indication.
It does. I use it. When I go to a new country, yeah, I quickly look up how bad is it, and I can Okay, it's not as bad as Italy, but it's worse than Slovenia or something, you know. Yeah, it gives you a quick indication. Yeah, if I go to, I've never been to Estonia. I've never been to Estonia, but if I see that Estonia is number 18 in par with Belgium and Ireland, well, I probably can get around there for a week without a policeman stopping me and asking for a bribe. But I have one big problem with this list, something that we touched on a little bit earlier on.
Doesn't include the grants, the
Yeah,
grant corruption,
exactly.
because you don't find out about that.
Exactly. You can ask anyone, what do you think? How corrupt is Bangladesh? How corrupt is Somalia? And probably everybody has seen pictures and films and news items about Somalia. Or let's take in Europe, Italy. You see Italy is on the top of the third column. Yeah, we've all seen mafia films. So maybe the first thing we think of with Italy, and maybe we had some experience there, we think it's corrupt. And we all think that Switzerland is very clean, right? But that's because of the perception is colored by the petty corruption, but it's more everyday stuff. And yes, if you go to Switzerland, you will not find everyday corruption. That will not happen. You can spend a year and you don't see corruption. But at a high level, the banking industry in Switzerland, for sure, there are horrible things happening, but invisible to the public. And therefore, they are not reflected here. Okay, and let me pick my favorite country, the US. I don't think that color is deserved. Enough said. So nice, helpful, but only shows petty corruption. It gives you an idea when you go to a country how your everyday life probably will look like, but it doesn't tell the full story. So there is corruption here in the West as well. And here you see some examples. Whether you go to the banking industry, environment, I don't know if you remember these cases, Volkswagen, for years saying that their cars had a certain emission, which would meet the environmental regulations, but actually they had much higher emissions and they knew it. The war industry, very invisible, very dirty business, which even journalists can't see what's happening there, but man, there's a lot of money involved. Sports world, doping use, even in cricket, people being bribed to lose a game or to score or whatever. Police, police, yes, the police, here in the Netherlands. Every year the police needs new police vehicles. So they procure and they have a tender, a public bidding where any company can bid and give their offer. But somehow every time Volkswagen wins that competition. Then some investigation showed it's actually corrupt business in the Dutch police. If you watch it, this is every now and then, a couple of times a year, there's something about this in the newspapers. There's a new case, somebody has been found to be involved, measures are being taken, but this is the Dutch police. The pharmaceutical industry, what examples do we have here? Siemens, they pay a fine for bribing 1 billion euros. That's a lot of money. That's just a fine. You can imagine how much money was involved if you were fined 1 billion euros. And that's Siemens, a very decent, reputable German company. What is with GlaxoSmithKline? 110 people fired in China because it was found they were corrupt and they had to do something, otherwise their reputation was gone. So they just fired 110 people. What with Pfizer? Again, they settle. They pay 60 million to settle for something they have done illegally. Pfizer, one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies. I could go on and on and on with these kind of examples. The auditing firms, remember, I work for PwC. A a big accountants firm, which is the best in the world, the highest standing, hired by the Global Fund to go out and check, and they themselves constantly are involved in all kinds of illegal and shady business. I stopped working for them. The food industry. Meat inspection, the bio industry, the things happening there. Hey, what about this for the Dutch readers? So there's collusion going on to drive up the price of these little pickled onions. And politics. So all this happening in the West, in our own country as well, and that's ground corruption. Here we talk about billions of dollars, not $10 that you paid, Tessel. This is big and influential. So yeah, I didn't want to go into this video. No, I'm gonna stop this. If you want, there's a video about the arms industry, and you can watch it yourself later on. So if you ask me to make a map with corruption of the world, I would say it should be something like this. It's everywhere. And when you pick up, I know you may not read papers every day, but this week, when you find a newspaper, just maybe the couples, I see Femke, you're there with a friend, and just two of you, take a newspaper, take a marker, and go through that newspaper and highlight where you say, hey, this corruption, hey, this is, hey. You will see a lot of newspaper articles. Actually, it all comes down to one of these examples we've given. It is really happening all the time. Questions, examples? I hope you all realize this is not my real living room. I'm not that techie. Good. The impact of corruption. Why do I get so angry and so excited when I'm talking about corruption and when I see it happening in the field? Because it kills, it really kills. Especially, look, in the West we have a big cake. If part of that is lost for corruption, okay, the show goes on. People may not immediately lose their life. But in a poor country, in a developing country, low middle income country, if there's already not enough money, for example, for healthcare, and half of that is gone to corruption, that means people die because there's no medicine, there is no staff, there is no equipment, there's no hospital. People die. It's really, ultimately, it's an invisible link, but it's there. So the World Bank said, what is the cost and consequences of corruption? Well, basically they say, in short, it increases wealth for a few at the expense of society as a whole, leaving the poor suffering the harshest consequences. We shouldn't accept it. We should try to avoid it and fight it and expose it. This is a table which I found in The Economist some years ago, and it's a nice one. What do? On the horizontal axis, they take the same corruption perception index from Transparency International, which we've just seen, right? Countries on the right, scoring 10, are clean. The Denmarks and the New Zealands, they're clean. On the left are the countries perceived to be very corrupt. Afghanistan, Sudan, Congo. On the vertical axis, they use the Human Development Index, which is probably new for you, but it's basically an index that looks at a lot of parameters in a country. How is the life expectancy, the under 5 mortality, how is the freedom of the press in a country. If you mix all those kind of parameters together, there's an index. And the higher you score, the more developed that country is, the more pleasant it is in that society to live. So if you now put those two together, you see that there seems to be a trend that countries which are more corrupt also have a lower score on the Human Development Index and vice versa. we have no idea whether it works this way or that way. Yeah? There seems to be a correlation, but we don't know the causation. We don't know whether countries which are corrupt therefore remain underdeveloped, or whether underdeveloped countries are more prone to being corrupt. We don't know. Still, it's interesting because some countries are interesting outliers. Have you spotted some maybe? Maybe Timmy, you can tell us what's the case with Rwanda? What if we look at this? Why is it so isolated? What does it mean?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
In this graph, you see Rwanda.
Yeah.
And it's standing out on its own. What does
Yes.
that mean if you interpret this graph? Why is Rwanda in that lonely area?
I wouldn't know actually.
But what do you see from the graph? You don't need to explain why it is like that, but what does it mean?
See, it's below the red line.
Yeah.
Even kijken. No, I wouldn't know. I'm sorry.
No, okay. It is there because based on its Human Development Index, which is low, Rwanda is not as developed as Switzerland or the Netherlands. So based on that, you would expect Rwanda to be more corrupt. You wouldn't expect Rwanda to be more on the left to fit the red line. But it's not. Rwanda is perceived to be less corrupt than you would expect. The same for Bhutan and Botswana. They're less corrupt than you would expect based on the Human Development Index. On the other hand, Italy and Greece are more corrupt than you would expect. Now, I've been to these countries. Has anyone been to Rwanda in the group? No? If you had, I'm sure, Tessel, that you would not have that experience that the policeman stops your car and asks for a bribe. It happens all over Africa, not in Rwanda. It's true. That kind of petty corruption is not there. Why? Because the president, Paul Kagame, he is like a dictator, but in a way he's a good one. He doesn't accept any corruption in his country. And he will punish people hardly. So somehow it doesn't happen there. He is a crook. He will kill his political opponents, even if they're in London or South Africa. He doesn't want any political opponents, but in his country, no corruption. Meanwhile, he is committing all kinds of crimes in the Congo, but not in Rwanda, clean. So that's an example, just like the other ones, Botswana and Bhutan, small countries with small populations where a leader decides, I don't want corruption here, and therefore can be successful. It would be very difficult for somebody like that president of Rwanda to do that in Nigeria, a much bigger country. But in a small country, a good leader who wants to stamp out corruption apparently can do that. So, okay. And we move on. Let's move to the healthcare. According to the United Nations, healthcare is among the most corrupt sectors. Whoa. Had you expected that? Probably not. I can see from your faces, you are young, motivated, idealistic people. You are studying medicine. You've opted for this course. To me, that shows already you are biased. You have a predisposition to help people, to be honest. And yet, in that health sector that you will be employed is one of the most corrupt sectors. Let's look at some examples that I've come across. This one is me in Zambia with my students. When I arrived there, I was told that these students have A levels. However, when I started working with them, many had no idea the difference between an atom and a molecule. Huh? A levels? You don't know the difference between an atom and a molecule, but where to start? Many examples like that. Okay, I soon found out why that was the case. Because after a few months, there was a new enrollment of new students for this course. So in the newspaper was an advertisement, and anyone interested to do this pharmacy course, they had to send an application to the school with their CV, with some reference letters. They had to pay something like $20 application fee. So the school got hundreds of letters, which all ended up on my desk without the $20 bills that went to the school. And it was my task with my colleagues to sort out from this pile of applications the next 25 students for the next year. Okay, so we spent a few weeks going through those papers, make a selection, invite some of these students, the ones that we wanted, invite them over for interviews. We even let them make a test with some calculations, some basic chemistry and physics questions. And based on that, we said, these are 25 super students. These are the ones. So we make the official list, give it to the head of the school. It goes to the ministry. They get their invitation letters. We go maybe on a 2-week holiday, and we come back, we open the school, and there's my class. And I don't know anyone. None of these students that were in the new class had been selected by us. They were all just pushed in by people in the ministry because they had relatives and they knew in pharmacy you can make money. They didn't have the qualifications, they didn't have the motivation, we'd never seen them, and there they were, there's nothing we could do, we had to train them. And now I understood why many didn't know the difference between a molecule and an atom, because they didn't even have A levels. Now, can you imagine that at that moment your world shatters? I'm just graduated, I get my posting in Zambia, I'm going to teach people in Zambia to be pharmacists, look after their country, strengthen the healthcare system. Everybody, you know, my grandmother is proud of me. And then I found out that I'm basically teaching some corrupt people's children things that they're not qualified for. And they probably don't have the right ethics either. What do you want to do now? You want to run away, you want to go home, cry. So what to do? Okay, you can run away. Back to Holland, open that pharmacy on the corner of the street. You can get angry. It won't get you anywhere. You can go to the ministry or to the head of the school. It won't get you anywhere to get angry. What to do? So I went to the head of the school. I asked officially for a meeting with the head of the school, the principal, through his secretary. And I said, it's something very urgent, very important. She said, what is it about? I said, well, it's really very important. I better speak to him directly. Okay, so the next day in the afternoon, 4 o'clock, I'm welcome. So you come into the room, there is this man whom I hated. Mr. Wehrens, nice to see you, welcome. You're a very good worker. I get many good reports from you. You work very hard. I'm very happy with you. Okay, thank you very much. And then you just, you know, that long introduction and asking how are you and how is the family and how is the school, and there must be many issues on your plate. And by the way, your son, who was also in my class, very well-behaved young man. That one, you look after him. Yes, I will look after him. And there comes a point where even he's thinking, why did he come to me? So you don't come in and say, look, what happened now is impossible. You have to talk. You have to, no. You come in humble, ask for his family, take time, build some report. And now he asks you, why do you come to me? Okay. You know, I sought this meeting with you to get your advice, hoping with your experience and your position you can help, because there is something, you know, that could really impact on the reputation of our college. Because some of the students that have been enrolled, as we have seen, you know, they don't quite meet the entry qualifications. It's, really? Yes. And despite, you know, we made a selection and we did our best, but some apparently we can see they don't have the right experience or mentality or even the qualifications. So I come to you because this could impact very badly on the image of our college. Mr. Wehrens, very good you come to me. You know, people don't tell me that. I need people like you to tell me this. Otherwise, what can I do? So it's very good you come to me, and we'll see to it that next year, this will not be repeated. Mm-hmm. Okay, we're on the right track. So may I make a suggestion how we can maybe do it? You know that every year we make this list of the students that we select. Yes, you do that very nicely. So maybe we can publish that list in the newspaper. And the moment we have it, we publish it in a newspaper, so it's firm that these are the ones. And I can understand, by the way, that there must be some reasons to add in some extra people. So if we maybe selected 20 instead of 25, that would leave 5 positions open for you or at the ministry, you know, for special considerations. I hate to do it, but if I don't do it like that, I will never get this done. So he agreed. And he thought by next year, Mr. Ron will have forgotten all about this. We'll see next year as a different year, right? But next year, I hadn't forgotten it. So we selected our 20 students. I paid for the advertisement in the newspaper. And there they were, 20 names. And we got another 5 shuffled in, and that's how we went. And that was a really good year. And we did that 3 years in a row until I left. Then my Zambian colleague took over from me. And he can't do that. He can't. He's on the picture, by the way. But anyway, he can't do that because as a foreigner, you are independent. You have your salary, which is much better. You have your house. You have other options. But my Zambian colleague, dependent on that job for his house, he had this little quarter in the school premises where he lived with his wife. So if he is not complying, or if he makes enemies at the school, he's fired. He will not have a house, he will not have a salary, he's got nothing. So he cannot do that. And I don't blame him for that. So for 3 years, we did it clean. And when I left, I know it went back to where we all started. And still, it's one of my proud stories where I think I've done something good. That was just one story. There's many here. Quickly, in Malawi, very, very big scale theft. Any hospital, any clinic, staff take medicines home every night. And that's difficult to tackle because it's not something central where you have to improve one thing with one person. No, this is all over. Many facilities, many staff, and this is a normal practice. Because they're paid so badly. The workers think it's their right. That's the way they survive. Very difficult to solve. But it's corruption as well. How about this one? In Uganda, the Mulago, which is the university hospital, many people appeared to be working there, but they were not working. They had left, they went abroad, they had died, whatever, and they were paid salary every month, but they were not there. Whoever cashed that salary, I don't know, but these kind of numbers were ghost workers, people who were not on the job, but being paid. And related to that, in Uganda, there were ghost hospitals that didn't exist, but every month they were supplied by the government with medicines which disappeared. But on paper, they had been delivered to a hospital somewhere which didn't exist. I get a message that it's time for a break. So we're going to do the break. So these are just a few examples of health examples that I've directly experienced. and that you will experience when you start working in these countries. So have a break, make yourself a strong cup of coffee, and shall we make 10 minutes and then start again? 10 minutes. So see you at, okay, 3 o'clock. Okay, everybody back. Sjoerd, where are you? Okay. So we've seen some examples in healthcare, and whether it is the enrollment of students in medical trainings, which don't have the previous qualifications, or health workers stealing drugs, or ghost workers and ghost facilities, all these kinds of things happen. I wanted to go with you into a bit more detail about procurement. Procurement, for those in Dutch, is de inkoop, de aankoop van spullen. So a lot of corruption happens in procurement. At least that's a lot of the part that I've been working with and trying to prevent and expose. So I imagine that maybe on the next mission we go together. And we have to see whether there was corruption in a certain country in the money that was used. So if we go to the Ministry of Health outside on the street these days, you often find something like this. There's a notice board. Okay, that's progress. The ministry is sharing information with the public. And it shows exactly what is the government buying. Ambulances, the renovation of a hospital, new medicines. It should all be displayed here. And they usually do that. I mean, this is often under pressure from international donors and the World Bank that this is considered better, higher standard. So, okay, they do that. But if you and I would walk by here, it wouldn't tell us anything. It wouldn't really tell us whether there was fraud and corruption in the procurement or not. So for the public, it doesn't help. To really know what happens, you and I, we need to get access to a room like this inside the ministry with all the documents. And believe me, in most governments, they really keep all those dossiers. Anything related to procurement is filed. It's not easy to get access to these files, but every document is filed. And it has to be by law, and they do that. So only if you get into this room, you have a chance of seeing the real picture, to see really what happened with that procurement. And again, in my role previously for the Global Fund, they had to give me access to these kind of rooms. So let's see. Just a moment. So if we had access to this room and we wanted to know whether that certain procurement of medicines that happened last month was okay or not. So we take those files, maybe 5 files are relating to that particular procurement. What are some of the things you wanted to see? You and I, we sit down, we get the files, we open them, we flip through. What are some things that you would like to see?
Maybe the document that tells what kind of criteria are being put to the article that's being bought.
Yeah, absolutely. So at the beginning of such a procurement, it should be clear that, okay, exactly what are we buying, the specifications, and how are we going to decide, how are we going to rate the different bidders, the different companies? On what ground, the criteria, as you mentioned. What criteria are we going to use to decide that we're going to buy from this or from that company? Yeah, I want to see that. And that is normal standard in procurement, that those things should be written down and agreed upon and complied with. So yeah, that's a very good one. And I realize that none of you has probably been trained in procurement, but just use your common sense. I have never been trained in procurement either, but hey, suddenly you are there, you have to do this. What are you looking for? That was a good first one. What else?
The bills. Sorry.
The bills. Yeah, absolutely, the bills. Okay, so the money was paid, I don't know, $500,000 for some microscopes. I want to see the bill from the company. So now with that bill, I can see what was delivered, I can see the price, I can see which company delivered it or when they delivered it. So yeah, the bill is definitely something you want to see. What else? If you want to come with me, you have to give some good examples now. Eh?
It's a question for me or?
Anyone in the group?
Oh.
I'm asking you, we are together in that room.
Maybe the one responsible for, well, overseeing this or something?
Yes, I want to see names. Yes, exactly. There's a procurement team, a procurement committee, and eventually somebody high up who decides, yeah, I want to know, who are these people? Are they qualified? What are their backgrounds? If I have a name, I can talk to them. I can say, please, can you explain this? I want to see who was involved in that procurement. Yes, yes. Give me another one, please.
How many people bidded on the procurement?
Yes,
How
very
many
good
parties there were involved?
Very good one. What would you hope to find? And when would you get suspicious?
Well, I suppose you hope to find more than one party bidded.
Excellent. Excellent. If you see that, okay, they're going to buy $1 million, because we talk about that kind of money, right? We're going to buy for $1 million worth of medical equipment, or $1 million worth of medicines, or $1 million worth of mosquito nets. Yeah, and they advertised it. That's what you do with this kind of procurement. And you got one company only that says, yeah, we can do that. That's not competition. That is not likely to result in a good price. So yeah, I want to see that there was real competition, that there were at least several companies bidding. Yeah. So this is so obvious that in most procurement laws of countries, it says that there should be at least 3 different companies bidding. If it's not 3, you have to stop. You have to re-advertise and wait again until you get at least 3 companies bidding. Then you can proceed and check those 3 and decide which one is the best. Now, we don't have time for more, but for sure, if we really were in that room, you and I would, and you as well, you would have think of many more things that you say, hey, what about this? What about that? With this, we can, for example, if you have the bill, you can see it was delivered on the 15th of August. You can see, you can then say, okay, where are the goods now? So we go to that warehouse. If the supplier said, I delivered it on the 15th of August, then at the warehouse, I expect to see evidence that it was received. I hopefully can still see some of the stock remaining. And for the remaining stock that is not there, I want to see where did it go. So you and I can even say, okay, 1 million tablets were delivered on 15 August. Okay, let's go. This afternoon we go to the warehouse. We go to the warehouse, they say, yes, we received it, but it's all been distributed. We cannot show you anymore because it was an outbreak, it was urgently needed. We shipped it out to the hospitals. Okay, give us a list of all the hospitals and the quantities that you delivered. Okay, then we say, okay, let's go to this hospital. It's not so far, maybe half an hour. Let's go. According to this list, they received 200,000 tablets. Let's go and see if we find evidence that they received it, the tablets should still be there, whatever. In that way, you verify that the products are really received, really distributed, really being used where they should be used? Yeah. Okay, so some more things. Yeah, what exactly was procured? Show us which products, which quantities, and why these quantities. There should be some calculation to justify why we need this enormous amount of drugs. Yeah? Somebody must have said, okay, we need 1 million tablets of this, 3 million tablets of that. We need 120 computers. We need 300 microscopes. Why? On what basis have they calculated that? I want to see some calculation, okay? What are the specifications? If somebody just says we want 300 microscopes, what microscopes? Which magnification, which standards? Is it a light microscope or UV light microscope or fluorescent? What kind of microscope? I want to see that well defined at the beginning of the procurement, right? Quality standards, prices. Hey, from the invoice that you asked, I don't know who said that, from the invoice, we can see how much was paid for each item, and we can compare that with international standards. If you tell me that for these ibuprofens, you paid $100, I know it's too much, right? Now, with some experience, I have files, I know drug prices, especially of generic drugs like this. There is quite a common standard on the world market what this should cost. And if I see that you paid 5 times too much, 10 times too much, I become very suspicious. I would expect that you meet that international reference price. Who did you buy from? What procurement process was used? Were there other bidders, as you said? Show me those other bids. And have the products indeed been delivered in full? Okay. A little bit more about the specification. Because that is one trick in which procurement is often influenced. Let's look at this. Probably a hospital needs amoxicillin, right? That's not strange. If it is a pediatric hospital, they probably say we want amoxicillin suspension. So here you can see that we are specifying. We don't just say we want amoxicillin. No, we want amoxicillin suspension. Now, if I give this to procurement team, is that enough information? Anyone? If I tell the people next door in procurement that you have to buy this, is that enough information?
Maybe you want to know also how many, how much?
Yeah, and what else?
Maybe which brand, generic brand or...
Okay, what else?
How many grams?
Yes, the dose, the strength. So we are specifying now. We are specifying more exactly what we need. So amoxicillin went to amoxicillin suspension, 250 milligram and 5 milliliter maybe, 100 milliliter bottle. Oh yeah, because if we don't say the volume of the bottle, then one supplier may come with a mini bottle, 1 milliliter, and he will win the tender because he's the cheapest. So we have to standardize and say, look, we want amoxicillin suspension, 250 milligram in 5 milliliter, and it should be a 100 milliliter bottle. Okay, then we have to say maybe we want it to come with a small measuring cup, because many of the mothers, they don't know about teaspoons and milliliters. So with this measuring cup, we can help guarantee that the child gets the right dose. Obviously, we need to tell the quantity. Is it how many bottles? Hey, it must be registered with our national FDA. Many countries have established a Food and Drug Authority, and you cannot bring any medicine into the country if it's not registered with them. Just like it is in the Netherlands or in Europe or in America. Tanzania, for example, has a TFDA. So that must be in the specifications as well. And maybe you would say, oh, it should be in a plastic green bottle because it's light sensitive, and the bottle should be 5 inches high. What do you say about that?
That's too specific and not necessary.
Yes. What we did was good. It got better and better and better. Suspension, the strength, the volume, with a measuring cup maybe, it should be registered. Good. The specifications got better and better and better until I added this thing about the bottle. Hey, that should have been your reaction. Why not a brown plastic bottle? Why should it be green? Why should it be 5 inches high and not 6 and a little bit slimmer? Probably because the man who was making the specifications had a cousin who has a factory who makes amoxicillin suspension in green plastic bottles. And if I can manage to get this into the specifications, hey, nobody can bring it, only my cousin. So he will win the tender. I know already he's going to win. That trick just now is very common in procurement. In the specification, right at the start, right at the start. You sneak in a few little things like that and you know who's going to win. And that's what the Dutch police, remember, with the police vehicles? That's exactly what they did. You can imagine the specifications for the police cars. It has to be white, it has to be a diesel engine, it needs a blue revolving light, whatever. And then they put some funny little things in, which only Volkswagen can do. The size of the mirror, the seat should be adjustable in 4 positions, some few small things like that. And that means Toyota, Ford, Renault, they cannot do it because they have different specifications. But Volkswagen will, they will win, and they got it. So this is how you see how you can influence procurement through specifications. Don't do it, but I want you to be alert. If somebody's suddenly pushing these little things into specifications, you react like this guy did. Okay? Okay, procurement methods. Direct procurement is what you do when you go to do your shopping at the Jumbo or the Albertijn. You just go in, you pick your products, you pay, you don't negotiate. And that's it. It's a quick, very quick. Negotiated purchase is maybe something you do when you buy a new computer or you buy a new car. You go to some suppliers, you talk with them, you try to negotiate. You say, look, give me 500 euros off, or give me a longer guarantee or something, because I can see online I can get it cheaper. You are negotiating. That's nice. I do that. You probably do that. But if you buy with government money or with donor money at the scale we're talking about, you cannot do that. Because there's no objective reason why you ended up buying from a certain supplier. You have to go through competitive bidding. In Dutch, we call that aanbesteding. You have to go through that process, which means every step is done with a group of people, is documented, so that you and I can go to that room and see all these documents. Every step should be well documented and traceable, and every decision is supported. Because there were documents, there was an agreement, there was a meeting. We gave many companies the chance to compete. We evaluated them honestly with specifications, with criteria that we have set at the beginning. That is tendering, very different than your shopping at Albertijn. So this tendering is something, here you see an example from Tanzania, and you can see the steps. And you can see the number of days. Now, it looks very boring, and it is, but it means in total, this process takes 282 days. And that's what tendering, that's a disadvantage of tendering. You have to go through all these steps. Look, for example, at advertising, 50 days. Yeah, we have to advertise it in the newspaper or online. And then, we have to give companies time to respond. We have to give companies time to prepare their offer to us. 50 days, And then we may need a month to evaluate all those documents that came in a careful way, And then 60 days for the supplier to mobilize the goods, and another 30 for shipping to our country, and another 21 for the clearing at the port through customs. Yeah, 282 days. That's even optimistic. So this shows you how lengthy and careful tendering is. And the reason for all this is that you try to reduce the risk of corruption. Doesn't work often, but this is the idea. This is going to be, I'm going to skip this one, but this is nice, I guess. This is an example I found in Indonesia. In Indonesia, they bought microscopes, many microscopes, a lot of money. And they had 3 bidders. Can I see that here? Yeah. So here you see 3 piles of papers with all the details of the microscopes and the warranty and the conditions and whatever. And this is just the first letter on each of these 3 companies' bids, right? Now, you can't read that probably, or maybe some of you can. Does anyone read Bahasa? But you don't have to. If you look carefully, you say, hey, wait, these are 3 different companies. This is the introduction letter. Different letterheads, different signatures. But hey, what's happening? Why? That letter looks very similar, right? They look the same. And the price is also very similar, 8.5 billion rupees, very close. Isn't that suspicious? And the law says, yeah, you need 3 bidders, right? Otherwise you cannot proceed. And they get exactly 3 bidders, not 4, not 5, not 26, no, 3. Just enough to satisfy the legal requirement. And those 3 bids look identical. The price is a little bit different. Something was happening here behind the screens. Do you remember how we call this? A word that we encountered earlier on.
Fraud? Maybe?
Yeah, also, but okay, fraud is a good one, but something else.
Illusion?
Yeah. This looks highly like these 3 companies were working together. And they said, hey, wait a moment. Have you seen that the government is buying microscopes? Oh, yeah. How much should this cost? About 4 billion. Okay, look, if we are competing, then yeah, we're probably going to offer that 3.9 billion. We have very little profit. But if we work together, we offer it, okay, I make you a deal. I offer it at 8.5 and you offer it at 8.5 something, just a little bit higher, and you offer it even a little bit higher, then we submit. I'll help you, don't worry, I'll make you the letter, just put signature and then it's done. So we submit the 3 offers, I will win it, but I'll give you 500 million each. Just for you to go to, this is what happened. So the other companies say, well, that's easy money, I don't need to do much. So you make, yeah, I make all the papers. I'll make for you, I'll make for you. Just you make it on your letterhead and you put your signature and that's all. And I will win it and I'll give you 500 million. That's what happened. And this happens every time in Indonesia. Every government procurement is done like that. And that's why no company wants to comply, wants to participate. They only get 3 bidders every time. Because if you had a company in Indonesia supplying microscopes, you knew it makes no point for you to make a bid. You will not get it because they will give it to one of these companies. Even if you're cheaper. If you offer your microscope at $6 billion rupees, they will find something in your proposal which is not okay. There's a tiny little technicality and you're disqualified, and that means one of these will win. That's corruption, grand corruption. Are you still enjoying?
Sir, I have a question.
Yeah.
What's happened to these companies actually after the corruption?
Okay, so this is just me with a colleague going into such a room, going through the files and discovering these 3 identical letters and even more similar things in the document. So we report, hey, this is corruption. But first we have to discuss this with the government. The government says, no, this is not corruption. They say, Mr. Wehrens, you don't speak Bahasa, do you? No, I don't. So how do you know? Yeah, I don't know Bahasa, but you look yourself, these letters are identical. They say, no, Mr. This is how we write a letter in Indonesia. This is standard letter, and they just use the same text. This is how we write a letter. Okay, but how come the price is so similar? Because it's tendering, they're competing, they just put very little profit. That's why they get the same price. Mm-hmm. Do you notice, good people, do you notice there, after the price, there is a bracket opening, right? And then there's a space. You see that? There's a bracket, and then there's a space, and then it says de la pan. Yeah?
Yeah, I see it, yeah.
Usually you and I wouldn't put that space, right? You open a bracket and you type your text. It can happen, but it's not normal. But they do that all. You can see this is copy-paste. Yes, they use a different font, but this is copy-paste. Still they were denying. Now, luckily, in this case, the Global Fund backed me and they said, stop, this procurement, stop, you're not allowed to do. We have to start again. But these are very difficult fights, I can tell you. To prove corruption, you make enemies, you won't make friends, you make one little error somewhere and they say, not true. They will play the cards that you are from Holland, you were basically or colonizers, we don't want you here, we want somebody else. When I started working in Indonesia, they were very nice, very friendly. When I understood the fraud, when I started exposing these things, they became very nasty to me and said, look, we don't want anyone from Belanda because you know the history. So you get into a very nasty game. But anyway, in this case, it succeeded. Global Fund agreed that this should not proceed. Okay, fraud triangle. I just go quickly now. This fraud triangle is helpful in understanding why the people get corrupt. Usually it takes 3 things. It needs a pressure. People need to have a need to be corrupt. Now, if you are working in Malawi as a nurse and you get paid $50 a month and you have 6 children to feed and your husband has HIV and I can go on. Yeah, you have a pressure. You can use money. You are in need. So there's a financial force pushing you towards fraud. Opportunity. If you work in a hospital where there's very little supervision, where nobody really is checking and counting the tablets, and you know you can get you can take something home. Nobody will ever notice. Okay, there's opportunity. You have the pressure. There's an opportunity, and then there's something else needed. Nobody wants to be corrupt. Nobody likes stealing. So people have to come up with a rationalization for themselves. So yeah, I take some medicines because everybody's doing it. If I don't take it, somebody else will take it. I take these medicines because I use it to feed my children. I take these medicines because what do you expect? If the government pays me $50 a month and I spend more than half on that on the bus getting to my work, of course, I have to steal medicines, otherwise I cannot survive. So those 3 are needed. The pressure, the opportunity, and the rationalization. So if you want to fight corruption and you are in charge of a hospital, there's at least a little bit you can do. Maybe you can improve the salary. It's not easy, especially if you work for the government, it's fixed, but you can help reduce opportunity. Extra checks, extra control, and maybe some extra work appreciation in other ways. If people see that you care, that you appreciate their inputs, that rationalization may be reduced because at least somebody cares about them. Okay, what to do with corruption and who is fighting corruption? Many countries have anti-corruption authorities. So don't be surprised if you walk on the streets of Kenya, Nairobi, and you see this at a building, anti-corruption authority. And this is where people can report corruption. The thing is, some of these organizations are good, some of them are corrupt themselves, and they're just used for political gains. If you want to, if the politicians want somebody eliminated, they accuse him of corruption and put one of these authorities on his neck. So you still don't know how you can trust these. Transparency International, we've seen, I didn't tell you much about them yet. It's an NGO. It started in Germany, now they're based in the UK. Many countries, including the Netherlands, give them money, and yeah, they are there to fight and expose corruption. I think it's a good organization, they do their best, but it's mostly that report I mentioned, the perception ranking, and that's based on petty corruption. I wished they were a bit more active also within the West, not only pointing out corruption in the developing countries. The Global Fund, remember? So they do audits, they employ PwC to go out. They have their own internal office where people can report corruption. And there's a big problem because Global Fund really wants to fight those 3 diseases. They want to save lives. Now, if you find that the country is corrupt, that they're abusing the money for, let's say, HIV program, what are you going to do? It's the Ministry of Health. You find that there's big corruption. What are you going to do? Are you going to stop the program? There are countries where 500,000 people or more get antiretroviral treatment with Global Fund money. You cannot stop that program. And you have targets. You said this year we want to have another 20% people treated. We want to have less child mortality. We want to, so you have targets, and constantly you find these kind of cases. Somebody like you or me is going and exposing these issues. It's not welcome news. And that's been very frustrating for me because you think, come on, be more strict. If you let this slip, it will be worse and worse and worse and worse. So I've been doing this work for 9 years and I've stopped doing it. About 2 years ago, I said, this is it, this is enough. I can't do it anymore. I couldn't motivate myself anymore to go into a country, do all these investigations, sometimes risk my own safety, and then see how little actually was being done with that information. This is a grassroots initiative, IPaidAbribe.com. This is something that started in India, and it enables anyone with a smartphone to report corruption. So if that policeman stops you, you can immediately, or after a few minutes, report that on this road, this police officer asked me this and that. So you can see live stream of corruption reports coming in. I like that because it gives power to everyday people at a lower level. Okay, I move to some personal advice. And then there's a few minutes for your questions or whatever you wish to contribute. I took a silly wallpaper and I'm going to have some old Dutch sayings, and that will be the basis for a few tips that I want to give you. And the first one is realize it's easy for you and me to be honest when you're well off. I mean, you are from a quite rich society. I know you may have a student loan. I know it's not easy, but relatively to people there, yeah, you are well off. Yeah, you belong to one of the richest countries in the world. You have a pension waiting for you. There's a secure law system in this country. There's security all around. So that is easy to not be corrupt. But your colleague that you work with in that country is in a very different position. I don't say you should, we should accept that there is corruption, but at least you have to understand what is behind it. $100 for them or $10 for them is a very different story than $10 for any of you here today. Prevention is better than cure. So if you expose corruption that happened last month, last week, last year, you go into a very nasty, difficult situation. It becomes really, it's not nice to do that. You'll make enemies, people will be fighting. It's very difficult. Better to use your time to prevent new corruption from happening. So in the next procurement, in the next checks on the pharmacy, be more careful, check extra, show that you are on top of the game. In that way, you reduce the opportunity, you reduce the risk of corruption. So better to use all your attention to prevent new corruption from happening than exposing and fighting something that happened last period. Stay away from suppliers. When suppliers know that you, Michael, are in charge of deciding what is being bought in the hospital, they'll be on your office. They will visit you constantly. And these suppliers, especially from the big pharmaceutical companies, they know everything about you. They have checked your accounts, your social media. They have maybe even spied on you. They make reports when they go back to the office, and they know exactly, are you sensitive for scientific information? Are you sensitive for female attraction? Are you sensitive for money? Are you easily influenced or not? Is your hobby football, or is your hobby reading Russian literature? They know. And back in the office, there's a file about you. So the next salesperson that comes to the hospital knows everything about you. They know how to play you. They know how to get your attention. They know how to make you, to influence your decisions. So stay away with them. Don't go for free lunches and meals, because you'll pay back. Trust nobody, at least not 100%. When it's for procurement, no matter how nice that person looks, in procurement, I don't trust anyone. So check. You want to see that invoice. You may call that supplier to check whether the invoice is genuine. You may go around and check whether that price is fair. Maybe there's much better prices on the market, and push your staff to fight for better prices. Maintain your independence. When your employer, the governments, when they see that you are dependent on that job, when you're dependent on that position, they know they can push you. They can push you because you won't run away. You need that job to pay for the school of your children in the international school. You need that job because you're already in you have a relation in that country with somebody from the country. You're in love, you want to marry. You're not going to run back to Holland. They know that. So be careful. And make sure you're always in a position where you can run away from a job if something is asked from you that you don't agree with. Very difficult to do, but important. Don't overreact. Most of you are Dutch, I see. And one of our we're known to be blunt and not very diplomatic. And when we see something that's not right, we say, that cannot be true. So you get angry. Try to control that. Count to 10, count to 12. Sleep one night. I don't say you shouldn't respond, but do it carefully. Think about it. Remember that example at school? I could have walked away straight away. I could have gone angry to that principal, but I decided to do it slowly, do it officially. It's like a chess game. And that had more effect than if I had been very angry. If you go and expose corruption, you need evidence, people. So pictures, video, audio, copies, emails, fingerprints, you record conversations. Many times I'm using this to record secret conversations when I'm interviewing people or when something happens. You need evidence to prove your case. Without that, you will lose it. And yeah, stay clean for your own sake. You will, some of you will be in positions where things are asked from you and you know it's not right. If you go along, it goes deeper and deeper and deeper until a moment where you can't get out anymore. So try to stay clean, upright. And if you find that in that position you cannot, you have to go along with the corruption, then say bye-bye. Take another job. Easily said than done, I know. But something I wanted to give to you at the start of your career. Okay, I have this for you. Okay, if anyone has any questions ever on your work, on your maybe you write a thesis, if it's something you think I can help you with, send me an email, I'll happily help you out. This is where you can reach me, you can link on LinkedIn. And let me go straight here. I have made a Udemy training, a free, it's an online training on supply management. And with this code, you have access to that. I know you're too much online already, it's not fun. But if for some reason you are interested in supply management, to know a bit more about that story, and especially medicines in developing countries, you can use this code. You have to use it within the next 3 days to activate it. And from that moment, you have free access to the whole course. It's 40 little lectures, total is 4 hours. Don't feel obliged, but if you want to know more about supply management, then this is your link. So I'll share this link and the link to Prezi with you through Jan. And that gives us a little bit, at least 10 minutes, I think, for your questions or comments. So you're welcome.
I have a question. Have you ever been in a situation where you were threatened or felt your life was in danger?
I've been in unpleasant situations. So I know this is a question that's on your mind. Have you ever been threatened and have you ever been bribed yourself? And the answer is no, no. I've been in a situation where I felt very unpleasant, but I never had a gun to my head. So there have been situations where I knew, oh, I've exposed something at a very high level. This goes up to the Ministry of Health or the Permanent Secretary. I better leave now. My flight is in 2 days' time, but I better get out of the country straight away. There have been 2 countries that kicked me out. They don't want me back. Okay, I can't go back. There's luckily enough countries. And hey, my company is just me. Remember? I'm independent. So, okay, let me give you an example of Kenya. In Kenya, I made a report which was not welcome to the government. They were not happy with the report because it exposed certain things. So what the government officials did, they said, oh, Mr. Ron, you're a very good consultant, very good. And your report is nice, it's good. You know, next year, there's a lot of work coming for you. We want to work with you. But if you write a report with this conclusion, you know, the minister will not accept that we hire you back. So if you can maybe, you know, delete this and change this, then we can hire you back next year. I'm just alone. I don't need much work to fill my agenda. So I could say, no, this is my report. If you don't like it, okay. If he doesn't like it, if he doesn't hire me back, it's okay. But this is my report. I'm not going to change it. That's what I mean, you know, when I say stay independent. And if I had employed 5 of you to work with me in my company and you were on the payroll, it might have been different. I need to pay you. We need work. We cannot afford to say no to Kenya and no to Nigeria and no to India because then the business is gone. So maybe we would have changed the report a little bit to make it acceptable. So that question, have you ever been threatened? No, it happens with that kind of tricks. Can you change the report so we can hire you back? If that doesn't work, they accuse you of being from Belanda, from Holland, and you are against Indonesia. If that doesn't work, they will find some small mistake in your report, some technicality, and they say, you see, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Yeah? That's the way they play with you more before it comes to the bullet to the head. The other question, have you ever been bribed? Believe me or not, no. And that also is because that goes slowly. What happened many times is they know this guy is coming, he's going to check or procurement. So before you arrive, you already get a letter. They say, oh, can you tell us which plane, which flight do you have and which hotel are you staying? And, you know, we'll pick you up from the airport. And if you want, in the weekend, we have a nice outing, you can join us. But that's how it starts. They want to pick you up from the airport. Yes, they will have a drink with you. They will take you out. And that's how they start checking how far can we go with this guy before they offer you the $50,000 envelope. I don't engage with that. I don't tell them my flight. I tell them I'm in the Hilton hotel, but I'm in a different hotel. And I don't go out with them in the weekend. So they already feel, there's no point asking this guy, you know, for money to do certain things. So both of that, both the threats and the bribes, it's a gradual scale. If you don't go along with that, I've been able to avoid. More questions?
Yes, I also have a question. I am curious because it seems like corruption does not stop on any high or low level, but are there also countries where there has been a clear shift in corruption, maybe in a good way?
In a good way. Okay, the Rwanda example is true. Rwanda, it is, I just spent the weekend with friends who work in Rwanda. It's not a very nice country to work. People are scared. People are very closed. They don't want to go into political conversations. They don't want to criticize the president, but there's no corruption. It's true. So the police you can trust, Corona, everything is according to the rules. If you take a motor taxi, in most African countries, the guy, there's a motor taxi and you join him and you don't get a helmet and he may rip you off and drop you, whatever. In Rwanda, these guys have a vest with a number. So you see, you went with number D56. And if he mistreats you, you can report him and he will lose his license. And he has to give you a helmet. That's Rwanda. That's very uncommon in Africa. So Rwanda is a strange example where corruption is under control, but nevertheless, the president is a crook. You get that? So another example where I think things have improved for the better. Not so many examples, I'm afraid. No.
So do I have to assume that it's only getting worse, or is it staying the same?
You know, things clearly, in some countries things get worse, but also the more you work, the more you know, the more you see. There have been countries where at the first visit I thought, wow, this is not bad. And then you realize the game is played on a very different level. Do you remember those 3 invoices from Indonesia?
Yes.
Being identical. Now, this is childish corruption. This is so, I mean, any fool would expose and see this. In Vietnam, I've worked a lot in Vietnam, the same thing happens, but yeah, they will have 6 or 7 bidders. And you don't find any similarity between these bids. They're big packets and they're completely different. But I've discovered it's all centrally coordinated. There are 7 teams working on 7 bids and they know exactly who's going to win, but very crafty. So in the first year, you think, wow, this is straightforward. This is how it should be. And as you go deeper and get more experience, you discover that it's just more advanced level of corruption, but it's there. So, you know, I've been asked today to talk about corruption, which obviously is not a nice topic. And I don't hope I've discouraged anyone of pursuing your career working in low middle income countries or pursuing your lust in life. But it happens and you better be prepared for it. And there's many other aspects of your work in these countries that really help people, really help society, are very rewarding for yourself. I don't want to take that away from you, but you should be aware of this. And I've had, I mean, we cannot travel together, obviously, especially not these days, but I've had young colleagues coming and said, hey, how come you spot corruption so quickly? How come you go into the ministry, you get and you see immediately where the problem is? I said, come along with me, like I try to do with you. You open those files, you ask some very simple, basic, logical questions, and then you discover it. And once you've seen it, once you've seen the tricks, you will recognize them again.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I hope that was helpful. And hey, again, when you get that newspaper in your hand sometime this week, just take a marker and circle the stories that you think are related to corruption. You will see them many, more than you had thought. That's sometimes I get groups of students that I meet again after a month or something, and usually they confirm that after this session, their eyes are open for corruption and they see it everywhere. Okay, then you have to deal with that for some time. You'll find a way to deal with it and to find your place in processing all that, and hey, then you have grown. So with that, I say good luck. Hope we meet live one day. If you are interested in supply management and you didn't get enough screen time, you're welcome on that Udemy course. But if not, fine, it's not obligatory. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, bye.
Thank you.